All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is National Weather Service, Peachtree City. We are doing the briefing for Thursday afternoon, January 29th, for the winter storm event that we are expecting this weekend. Just jumping right into it. There's a lot of slides I want to get through, so I'm going to try and get through this very quickly. Main points and headlines. We do have a winter storm watch out now. We just extended it from the overnight period into today. We extended it westward. Now covers a large portion of north and central and northeast Georgia through Saturday evening. We'll touch on that here in a minute. The potential for a very impactful snowfall does exist across parts of Georgia Friday night and Saturday. Confidence in that impactful snowfall has increased enough for us to issue that winter storm watch. And I'll talk about some of the areas that are on the edge when we get to that slide. Areas in Southwest Metro, Atlanta, and Northwest Georgia remain uncertain, and we could add you later, but for right now, we just don't have the confidence yet to throw you in a watch, but that doesn't mean you won't be added into something later. One thing I want to point out with this, similar to last January, similar to 2014, wherever it does snow, even up to an inch, it's going to cause travel problems because we're in a very unprecedented environment set up for snow and for cold. Going into the weekend. So because of that, any precipitation that falls onto the roadways is going to cause problems. And we'll talk about some of the other aspects of that with the wind and everything else this weekend. Snow could begin in North Georgia mountains late Friday evening, but the primary window really begins after midnight Friday through Saturday afternoon. That has not changed from yesterday. Our thinking on the timing still remains roughly the same. And so it's just a matter of pinpointing where, the where and how much. The other thing that has been added for today, which will be the period following this, an extreme cold watch is now in effect. This is equivalent of like wind chill warning sort of thing. The temperatures and the wind chills are going to be very cold. And again, we'll touch on that here in a minute. So yesterday we talked about the various scenarios and the upper low path that our system could take. And we have now, based on the model trends and the model guidance, essentially ruled out the scenario one, which would have been the least amount of snow for Georgia. And it looks as though the models are converging on more of a scenario two, maybe a little bit of scenario three blended in there. But for the most part, we're looking at a blend of path 2 and 3, more snow in east, northeast Georgia, and impactful snow amounts west of 75, which was basically what we were looking at yesterday if scenario 2 played out, and that looks like that's what is taking shape. If scenario 3 does come into play, where the system takes a little bit further southwest of a track, we could introduce more snow further west than I-75 and incorporate more of northwest Georgia, and that's really what's holding us back from including more areas to the west and the southwest. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but we can't rule it out yet. So here is the winter storm watch that is now in effect. You can see we're blending. I'm pretty sure Morristown to our north is adding the counties up along the Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee border. But it basically extends along and north of 16 and west of 75 and along 75 and all the counties in between. We'll get into the details within the watch, but obviously there's going to be a gradient of where we think and where our confidence is. Confidence is highest east from Blairsville to Gainesville to Athens, and everybody who was in the watch overnight. Confidence has increased in the area that we've added. And so now we're looking at snow accumulations up to 3 inches, locally higher amounts possible east, northeast Georgia, and locally higher amounts if any one of these bands that we're going to talk about sets up. Wind gusts up to 35 are going to be possible, especially during the day Saturday. So we're going to see a lot of blowing snow and low visibilities on roadways, in addition to the snow causing slippery conditions on the highways because temperatures are going to be falling through the day. In fact, our high on Saturday is probably going to be at midnight tomorrow night. And then we're going to see temps falling into the lower 20s and even teens during the daytime on Saturday. So extremely windy, extremely cold on Saturday with snow. The area I've outlined in red is where we need to monitor for expansion of the watch or going into winter weather advisory. So you folks on the western side of this, you're not out of the woods. We just need to see how things shake out in the next 24 hours and whether or not we're going to add you to a winter storm warning or a watch or winter weather advisory. So let's talk about timing a little bit. And I've done this in still shots because the animated GIFs sometimes get really weird trying to come through. But we'll go from left to right. 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Friday night, far northwest Georgia may see the beginnings of some snow showers or flurries beginning, but that really picks up after midnight through the 7 a.m. So go to the middle slide. That's basically the 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. time period. So we are seeing snow develop and increase across the North Georgia down to maybe the I-85 corridor, I-20. And then the primary window where we think the snow is going to be greatest, or at least the greatest risk, is in that 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday. Expecting snow to pretty much be area wide with an increase in the winds during that time period as well. So probably one of our roughest periods will be 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday, at least right now. And that will continue into the afternoon hours as well. So when does it end? And when do things continue? So stepping forward, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday, maybe we're starting to end things in northwest and western Georgia. One thing you'll notice, at least on this model run, we're seeing it in some of the models. You see these streaks that are showing up on the graph here. These are the models trying to resolve these snow bands or snow squalls that may be actually happening during the day. And in those, we could see a lot heavier snow, snowfall rates higher, visibility is dropped, and maybe a quick inch and a half of snow in a very short period of time. But that will primarily be along and east of I-75 in that 1 to 4 window. 4 to 7 p.m. Saturday, we're starting to shift things a little bit further east. We're definitely tapering off west of 75, and now things seem to be confined in the I-20, maybe the far northeast Georgia, and then out maybe I-16. And then all things should start really winding down 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. So that's Saturday night into early Sunday, and then tapering off area wide. There could be a few flurries still around, but for the most part, things should be winding down and wrapping up during the evening hours tomorrow night. Keep in mind, it's going to be extremely cold and extremely windy still. So during that period. Of course, the screen you all are waiting for was the official snow forecast on the left-hand side. You can see we've brought the 1-inch line back to I-16, I-75. That is essentially what we've used as our marker for the winter storm watch, since we feel fairly certain in at least 1 inch of snow, and 1 inch of snow causing a lot of travel issues given the environment, just like last January. The area to the west of that, half an inch up to an inch, doesn't mean it's not going to cause problems. We're going to have to see how things shake out. That area northwest Georgia, Rome to Dalton, back to Trenton, I have to watch you closely because there are some models that are hitting you a little bit harder, and so we may have to look at that when we get a little bit closer. Reasonable worst case scenario on the right hand side, you can see this would be your 90th percentile, anywhere from 2 to 6 all the way further east, and you can pick out the gradient from east to west from on that reasonable worst case. So given that the snow ratios are going to be 20 to 1, the errors could be magnified quite a bit. So we're expecting, like in this, you're going to see pockets of maybe 2 and 3 surrounded by areas of 1, just by the way this and the nature of this system and how it's going to play out. I do want to show this just because it's a model odds, the computer model. So this is, many of you have heard the European and the Canadian and the GFS. This is the European and the Canadian ensemble. So this is the total of about 70 computer model runs between the two of them. And it's the probabilities of at least 1 inch of snow. European on the left, anything in that dark red is 90 to 100% probability of at least 1 inch of snow. And the European actually brings that 90 percentile line essentially or back to maybe all the way to North Fulton and north. So we've seen that creep west, and that's what's given us the confidence to extend our watch to the west even further. And again, you can see the probabilities in northwest Georgia of all the places that are not in a watch right now. That northwest Georgia is the one that in these models has the highest probabilities of at least 1 inch of snow that we're going to watch close. But you can see the gradient, it tapers off pretty quickly, and there is a sharp gradient to it. Same thing with the Canadian model on the right-hand side. Highest probabilities Northeast Georgia, tapering to the west and the southwest. All right. Odds of 2 inches and odds of 4 inches of snow. Let me do a quick sound check. Can you all hear me okay? Somebody types in. Okay, sounds good. Somebody said we were cutting out. It may have been our internet. It may have been theirs. The odds of 2 inches and 4 inches, odds of 2 inches of snow on the left and the odds of 4 inches on the right. This is based on our forecast and the snow probabilities from all the models. So really anywhere in that has a probability, especially above 20 or 30%, that's a pretty decent probability of at least 2. And then on the 4 side, you can see that it's mostly confined to that far northern, northeastern, and far eastern Georgia. So if you drew a line from, say, Augusta to Athens to Gainesville to Blairsville and east, maybe over into Fannin County, your odds of significant snowfall greater than 4 are not bad, but we can't rule them out for sure. We've showed this before. This is the probability of minor impacts. This is the WSSI, the probabilistic severe index. And you can see, again, highest probabilities in the east taper off to the west. Probabilities in the northwest have increased. We got 40 and 50% of at least impacts, minor weather impacts. Again, that would be mainly travel. And biggest questions for us are going to be on that northwest Georgia and southwest Atlanta metro. So that would be, say, Spalding, Upson, Coweta, Douglas, Carroll counties. You folks, maybe Thomaston, LaGrange, that region seems to be the secondary area outside of Northwest that we'll have to pay attention to. But what can you do at this point? Obviously, we need to begin for travel impacts this weekend. In addition to the cold impacts, it's a totally separate preparation, but basically spread the word that you can plan for multiple days of food and medication on hand, especially if your roads are impacted and you're unable to get out because of icy roads. Moderate impacts. This is the probability of moderate impacts. Again, highest in that eastern sector, but we do have the 40% line that basically comes back I-20 all the way into the eastern metro, gets up into the northern metro and northeastern metro, and then out northeast. 20 to 30% probs for most of the metro and the I-75 corridor for at least moderate impacts. And when you look at the scale of what moderate impacts mean, moderate impacts are mainly travel in this case. Somebody's asking the question, do we expect power outages? If there are going to be power outages, it would be the result of the wind on Saturday and not the snow. This is going to be very light, fluffy snow. It's not going to stick to a lot of things. Even if we get 4 or 5 inches of snow, it's not going to be heavy. It's going to be very light. So snow load, those types of things are not going to be an issue. It's going to be the wind on Saturday that causes problems for power. So we showed this yesterday. What do we mean by impactful snow? These are all pictures from last January where we saw under an inch of snow and what it did to the roadways. And this is essentially what we're talking about with this system on Saturday. So the roads are going to probably freeze up fairly quickly after the onset of precip. So for those of you in the emergency management, the 911, the folks that receive those calls, shortly after the onset of precip, like what we saw last year, was about a 1 hour delay from the time precip and the time you were starting to get calls. That seems to be about right, because that's about how long it took for the precip to fall, cause a little bit of melting and then refreezing on the roadways, and then people driving over them to slip off the road. So just keep that in mind, that it won't be long after the onset that you start experiencing problems. All right, so at this point, we're going to switch over to the temperatures and the cold. I'm going to turn it over to Sid. He's going to take over the temperature aspect.
So thank you, Keith. In addition to the snow impacts, the cold temperatures and the cold wind chills themselves are going to create significant impacts of their own. over the weekend, including for areas that don't even see any snow. So the colder air associated with this system is expected to arrive late Friday into Saturday and remain all the way into early next week. On the left-hand side of this graphic, of this screen here, you'll have our basically our 3 hourly increments of our temperatures. And you'll see, especially Saturday night going into Sunday morning, we have lows in the teens, even some locations seeing single digits during those times. And furthermore, prolonged freezing temperatures or below freezing temperatures could also lead to an extended threat of pipe bursts and cold-related illnesses. And by the time the snow begins early Saturday morning, which we're anticipating, the below freezing ground temperatures are also going to help the temperatures, are going to help the snow to instantly or nearly instantly stick on the roads, leading to those travel concerns we talked about earlier. So here's our wind chills during that time. We already mentioned the single-digit temperatures, but if you take a look at the wind chills, when the winds are going to be up a little bit during the overnight period, especially Saturday into Sunday, we're going to be looking at wind chills that are very uncommon for the state of Georgia, for even in this time of the year in late January. You could see some temperatures, some wind chills in the negatives across the area, even down into -10 as low as -15 in portions of far northeast Georgia. So here's our low temperatures and wind chills on Saturday, and we still have some lows in the teens and 20s on Saturday with wind chills generally in the single digits in the teens. But then Saturday night into Sunday is where it gets even lower. Where this is our low temperatures generally in the teens and the single digits in the far portions of northeast Georgia. But our wind chills are going to be significant. Nowhere really in our area are we expecting our wind chills to be higher than 5. And in these light purple colors here in the far northeast, we could be getting as low as -15-degree wind chills. So especially anyone outside during those times, it's not going to take long for adverse impacts to set in from the exposure to these temperatures. So we, of course, during this time, we encourage people to bring pets indoors, check on their neighbors, wrap your pipes, protect your pipes, and so on and so forth. And so because of that, we have an extreme cold watch in effect across our area, and that should soon be upgraded within the next couple of forecast packages to an extreme cold warning. That will meet the criteria of wind chills or feels like temperatures between -5 and 5 degrees in portions of central Georgia, and then as cold as -10 and 15 below in the mountains. So, and then we'll still remain cold on through Monday morning, not quite as cold, but still well below freezing across the majority of the area. And there's a potential for some prolonged periods of sub-freezing temperatures when you add all that up. So very cold air is going to move in with Friday night, and at that point, a lot of our areas in the far north will drop below freezing. And with that continuing into early Monday, there's many areas generally along and north of the I-85 corridor that are going to remain under freezing for about 50 hours. Not only are these cold temperatures going to increase the likelihood of snow accumulations on roadways with the below freezing ground temperatures, but snow accumulations and any roadway impacts are going to linger with the below freezing temperatures. And even in locations down in the southeast, like around Sandersville, Macon, even those areas that briefly warm above freezing, they're only going to get into about the mid-30s. And that is, so you're not going to see much melting even in those locations. So I'm going to hand it over here to Lindsay, and she's going to talk a bit about the wind impacts that we're expecting as well.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I see we have a question that was about the winter storm watch. And I wanted to clarify the time that that is going to be in effect from. So it will start at 7 p.m. on Friday and then carry through about 7 a.m. on Sunday. So that is the current time range that we have in effect for. There's a potential that we change the timing of that if we anticipate impacts being later than we currently have forecast. But right now, that's our best guess for timing. And then, so now kind of shifting gears back to just how kind of bizarre and unseasonable and just ungeographical the type of snow that we're expecting this weekend is. So first, highlighting the breezy winds that we're expecting. So shown here on the right is our kind of maximum wind swath grid. And basically, we are expecting a fairly wide area. Generally, the western half of the forecast area is looking to see wind gusts on the order of potentially 30 to 40 miles per hour. And that is illustrated in just a little bit more detail on the left side of the screen. So like Keith mentioned before, we are expecting kind of the core of the strongest wind gusts to move in on Saturday afternoon and then linger overnight and start to taper off around early afternoon on Sunday. And like we mentioned before, this is going to overlap with the time frame that we are expecting the potential for the heaviest snowfall. So this is going to introduce the potential for something that we don't deal with very often in Georgia, which is blowing snow. So because of that, we are showing here on this graphic the combination of the probability of snow showers, which is going to be the numerical values there, and then also the potential for gusts over 30 miles per hour. So you can see that we're really kind of expecting it to fall along the I-75 corridor. So it is difficult for us to predict where we're going to see banding of snowfall ahead of time. That's unfortunately more of a nowcast once we actually see the storm move into our area. That being said, we can say that ahead of time, if we do see banding of heavier snow showers, with those gusts, it's really likely that we're going to see very low visibilities. So anyone who is, out braving the roadways during this time frame could see a rapid decrease in visibility that could be potentially dangerous to anyone on the roadways. And that is in combination with the fact that we're expecting any snow accumulations to pretty much start causing deteriorating road conditions almost instantaneously when they start falling. From there, we've thrown a lot at you today as far as just kind of the breadth of what we're expecting from this winter storm this weekend. So we wanted to kind of highlight just how the different hazards are going to be overlapping through the weekend. So caveat being here that this is just going to be the general timing of threats across north and central Georgia. We're intending this to be kind of like a high level outlook. So sometime on Friday evening into the Friday overnight period is when we're expecting accumulating snow to begin. Again, generally starting across portions of northwest Georgia and then filtering further to the south and east as the storm kind of progresses. From there, as we move into the Saturday morning timeframe, the Friday overnight into Saturday morning timeframe, that's where we're expecting to start to see those kind of hazardous cold conditions filter in. Initially, we're expecting wind chills to be below 10 degrees, but as the secondary push of cold air moves in during the evening on Saturday into Sunday morning, that's the time frame that we're expecting wind chills to be even colder, below 5 degrees. So the colors that are shown for the hazards that I just discussed match up with the products that we currently have issued. So the blue is the Winter Storm Watch, and the Winter Storm Watch in this case is also going to carry the mention of those potential for wind chills below 10. And then the Extreme Cold Watch has been issued for, again, that Saturday evening into Sunday morning to afternoon timeframe to cover the even colder wind chills below 5. So notably here, we include the potential for accumulating snow up to 3 inches in the Winter Storm Watch right now, but we do acknowledge that there's a pretty big gradient across the forecast area as far as the expected amounts right now. So The areas that we're expecting about potentially 3 inches or maybe more if we see banding would be generally across northeast Georgia. And then as you move further to the south and west, amounts taper off to generally around a half of an inch. Caveat in this situation that a half of an inch of snowfall is going to cause impacts quickly and could still result in hazardous conditions on the roadway. So the key messages that we want you to take away from this slide is basically that any snow accumulation is going to be impactful this weekend, and that's not always the case. So like Keith mentioned, we do expect reports to start coming in fairly soon after snow starts falling on Friday evening into Saturday morning. And then the cold air and gusty winds will make for fairly dangerous wind chills this weekend. We'll continue to update and potentially upgrade or expand any of these products as necessary, but this is what we've got right now. And then kind of going into more of our discussion about kind of the character of the snow we're expecting this weekend and why it's so unusual. So we've referenced snow ratio quite a few times in this presentation, and that basically is referring to the amount of liquid that would result if you were to melt whatever snowfall has accumulated in your area. And it can range widely depending on how cold and how dry the air mass is. So our temperature profile this weekend is very anomalous. We're very cold, even for this time of year and especially for Georgia. So the colder it is, we generally see those snow ratios trend higher. And that makes, seeing a question here, how long do we anticipate snowy, slushy, icy conditions to persist? It remains to be seen how long we see snowfall on the roads. A lot of that will be a function of how much actually ends up falling. But if you think back to a couple of slides ago when Sid was discussing how long we're going to stay below freezing, which in some cases is as much as 50 to 60 hours, we definitely expect the snowy and slushy and icy conditions, maybe less on the slushy side, but more on the icy side, to continue well into Monday, and potentially even into Tuesday, depending on how melting ends up going once we start. So back to the forecast, the fact that we have such a high snow ratio for this specific event introduces unique forecast challenges in that any small adjustment in the moisture, the temperature, the track of the low can lead to very big changes in the total snowfall that we're expecting. So typically in the southeast, we generally have a snow ratio somewhere something around 6 to 8, and generally less than 10, which trends toward a heavier and wetter snow. So that is where we get those slushy conditions that we're all used to. This time around, our snow ratios are closer to 20 to 1, which is very light and fluffy. And that is why we have increasing concern about the potential for blowing snow this weekend. Additionally, for those of you who've been perusing social media or viewing model guidance yourself, it's also important to remember that most model guidance is going to be using 10 to 1 as the snow ratio, just kind of as a default, because it usually works pretty well for most areas in the country. This time around, like I mentioned, we are expecting ratios to be about 20 to 1, which is effectively double what that kind of, characteristic, stereotypical ratio that's being used in model guidance is. So it's important to kind of make that correction, make that adjustment if you're viewing raw model guidance, on social media or on your own perusal. So from there, I'll hand it back over to Keith so he can wrap things up with the main points and then answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, so just wrapping this up, there's a lot we have in effect. The winter storm watch, again, look for expansion for that potentially, particularly on the west and northwest side. We are looking at that impactful snowfall. Can't reiterate it enough. Wherever it snows, even up to an inch, it's going to cause some travel problems. Looking at late Friday night, probably after 10 to 1 a.m. Friday night, roughly, for the start. I know our winter storm watch starts at 7 p.m. That's to account for anything that may come in early. So there's a little bit of leeway on that. But generally speaking, we're looking at 10 p to 1 a for the start of any precip in the northwest. And then continuing through Saturday as we walk through. And again, this extreme cold watch. It's going to be pretty brutal out there on Saturday and even into Sunday with the wind and the wind chills. So with that, we do have another briefing. We'll do another one tomorrow. We'll probably have the warnings up at that point, and we'll discuss the changes between now and then tomorrow in that briefing.